When Power of the Force 2 launched in 1995, it had really big boots to fill. Shoes to fill? What do they wear in Star Wars? They wear boots. Okay, well, Star Wars shoes. Do they wear flip-flops? Maybe on Tatooine. Well, either way, the Power of the Force 2 line became a cultural icon into itself, the very first wave becoming a classic at this point, despite the monkey faces and giant buff torsos. And they were a good deal at $4.99 for a figure, accessories, removable cape. Hey, you couldn't go wrong. Well, it wasn't too long before the economy caught up to this, and, well, prices did need to go up to $5.99, and this was accompanied by a incentive, an packed-in freeze-frame slide, meaning every figure now came with more value, because, hey, if you're going to charge more, it's good to throw something else in. While this might not be a dollar value, hey, at least it was something different, unique, and, if there's one thing we know, it's kids love playing with slides, collecting them, displaying them, and okay, who am I kidding? This was an interesting attempt, and it was neat, but the idea of going to show and tell and showing everyone your Star Wars collection via slide projector probably wasn't something too many kids were actively doing. Well, it's kind of an old technology. I can't even imagine what it would be like packing in slides with toys now. I mean, this used to be a huge thing, doing slides. It's no wonder that they wanted to include them in the Power of the Force 2 sort of 2.0 relaunch with the added value because, well, until then, slides were a big thing. Maybe less so now. Heck, they even had different accompanying items such as a mail-away booklet, or rather slide holder, that you could put all of the slides in. And what was probably the coolest item, one that I regret never getting, was Luke's micro-binoculars from Tatooine that was actually a slide projector. Well, okay, it didn't project the slides on the wall, but you could look through them, and by inserting a slide into the top, you could at least experience what it was like to see a Star Wars slideshow in the fun of your own living room, I suppose. So, yeah, I mean, it made a cool giveaway item. But giveaway items do need to evolve, and evolve they did. When Episode 1 was on the horizon, in order to push the excitement and enhance that, Hasbro started packing in flashback photos. Now, it wasn't just single figures, but also 3-packs that were part of this sort of pre-Episode 1 launch, and it involved all of the main characters, getting them back out to market, with slightly updated looks and deco. It wasn't exactly the Malibu Stacy's new hat as much as it was a way of bringing all of the characters that were going to have a connection to Episode 1 to market so that, well, people who were less familiar with Star Wars could get excited all over again. So the back had lots of real estate dedicated to the excitement that Episode 1 was just a summer away, despite the fact that it had no title at this time, and we'll get into that actually in a moment, with all the characters showcasing their classic trilogy and now prequel trilogy Episode 1 look. You could take an old figure like Obi-Wan Kenobi and pull on the flashback folder, and suddenly he became young again. Or, Luke Skywalker could show up as young Anakin Skywalker. Not the same character, but shall we say the same role in the film, both Tatooine farm boys, etc. Well, the PR and the excitement, the energy for getting Episode 1 out was huge. Now, like I said, it didn't have a title at this time. It was just called Episode 1. Phantom Menace wouldn't be added until very late in the game. In fact, so late Hasbro wasn't even able to put it on packaging. And one of the consequences of all of this rev-up was the last wave of freeze-frame figures. Well, they kind of fell into limbo because retailers were being encouraged to purchase the freeze-frame wave. The flashback wave, which meant they discontinued the freeze frame. Boy, lots of F's here. Gotta keep your pack-in straight. This was very similar to other lines. As an example, 3 3/4 Hasbro Indiana Jones. There was also a final wave of figures that was designed to ship, but as the retail wave cooled, well, this final wave needed a home, and in this case, it became the Lost Wave, because, that sounds very Indiana Jonesy, and was released at San Diego Comic-Con as a convention item, where 6 individually packaged figures were bundled together in a large box, and you could, of course, have them and display them individually, open them up, add to your collection, and it was a great way to sort of top off the Indiana Jones line as it sort of sunsetted after the final movie, the 4th movie. The same thing happened with Lord of the Rings, where final figures that didn't make it to retail because, well, retail was cooling off on the line after 4 years and 3 movies, but the final wave, tooled and packaged, meant that it shipped to other markets such as international or as add-on discount items with bulk sales where you could buy a pack of figures and those would be included. Marvel Legends with Toy Biz had the same thing, where several figures that were designed for the original Spider-Man Classics line, like Scorpion and Venom here, were just essentially reshuffled and released as single figures under the revamped Spider-Man line, which followed Marvel Legends. Not the line that preceded it, which was Spider-Man Classics, which was originally going to have a third wave that would have included these figures. So here's Spider-Man from Wave 2 of that, the pre-Marvel Legends Spider-Man 6-inch compatible line. All right, well, back to Star Wars. The race was on for Episode 1, and it was everywhere. Everyone was getting excited about it. This was a big deal. We hadn't had a Star Wars movie since 1983, and retailers had to sort of figure out how to sidestep ordering since they were already taking the freeze-frame figures, but they were now being told, oh, wait, we're switching over to the flashback figures because these are tied directly into Episode 1. And look, they have Episode 1 right on the front of the package because everyone should get excited about this. Made sense. Main characters, tie into upcoming entertainment, price increase, which retailers like that, more margin for them. And, well, for collectors, this meant that that final wave of freeze frame, which included essential figures like Hoth Leia, well, they were getting passed over, more or less. And a home was needed because everybody was just focused on Episode 1. It was extremely groundbreaking at the time. Now we have a new Star Wars movie or TV show, several times a year. Back in 1999, 98, well, this was basically what our childhoods had been leading up to, the idea that there was going to be more Star Wars, something beyond Return of the Jedi. Now, I was really lucky that this wave was released at alternate retailers and through that Star Wars Insider magazine, but it did show up at Disneyland at the Star Trader, and that's where I was able to find this wave. Like I said, main retailers skipped over it, but some alternate retailers, like the Star Wars gift shop, did get this wave, and you could order it from the fan club from the Star Wars Insider. So it included Princess Leia and Hoth, the M-Class droid, Death Star droid, the black version, the AT-AT driver, and then finally the incredibly obscure Pot-Snitkin. So we'll get into him in a moment. All right, so looking at Leia, well, we've obviously had many Hoth Leias since then, and, well, we've had sort of two, well, actually one before then. The Mynock Hunt actually made it to market. There would be later Princess Leia's in her Hoth outfit that would absolutely put this Power of the Force 2-1, I wouldn't say to shame, but at least out to pasture. I mean, heck, even the 5 points of articulated, that's not a word, articulation Princess Leia that came out during the Disney movies is quite an impressive figure. And I think one of the frustrating things for fans at the time was we'd had this character in this look in different scales, i.e. the 12-inch figures from Kenner Hasbro. So not getting her in the Power of the Force 2, 3, and 3/4 was a little frustrating. Originally, she was supposed to premiere as part of the the Complete Galaxy line. Total Galaxy was something different. Complete Galaxy line, where all the planets would, inside there would be a figure and you got a cool globe of a Star Wars planet. There was going to be a second wave if these had continued, which would have had Hoth, and while there was some look at doing an alternative version of the generic Hoth soldier, who had already been released as a single card and as a deluxe figure, Sans Beard, this is the single card version, there was also review of having Leia make her premiere appearance in her Hoth outfit as part of this set. But when the second wave was canceled due to low sales, she got shuffled off, and her regular carded release didn't show up till later on, with the idea that all of the Galaxy figures were sort of slightly different than the carded release. Slightly different Ewok, etc., etc. So it was great to finally get this very essential version of Leia on a single card. There was a version of her in the Mynock Hunt where she had a removable mask and the gun was more of a sort of draw. All right, next up we have an interesting one, the RA-7 Protocol droid. All right, so I got to take a step back on this one because this droid refers to the bug-eyed droid that shows up throughout Star Wars, and he shows up in it shows up in lots of different colors. My personal favorite being the purple version that shipped with a comic book Marvel Boba Fett as a 2-pack, but that's a whole other YouTube video. In the original trilogy, this character most notably shows up twice. First, in the Sandcrawler as a silver droid with black eyes, has a close-up. Later on, a black droid with silver eyes, inverted colors, shows up on the Death Star. While this character didn't get a close-up, you can see him stumbling along here in the detention hall when they're bringing Chewbacca up as part of the ruse to rescue Leia. So this has meant that this droid has been released as both a Jawa accompanying figure, both packed in with playsets, with vehicles, single-carded, and the figure has also been packed in as a Build-A-Figure. So when droids in the Legacy collection, you could buy 5 or 6 figures, get all the parts, assemble them. Well, both the silver version and the black version were both available. And there's been a lot of mix-up as which version is this, which character, what's their name, and there's even a third version that isn't even any of these. So the reason all of this comes to a head is in the vintage line, in the Kenner line in the 80s, this was one of the few droids released, and one of sort of the only other sort of protocol E-droids, like C-3PO. And the figure was called Death Star Droid on package, even though it clearly showed the silver version with black eyes that was seen in the Sandcrawler. Although the version shown on card, or rather, and the one packed in, didn't quite match either of them and winds up being a third character altogether. So for Power of the Force, a kind of a right was made, or a wrong was made right, by finally having the Death Star droid ship, calling it the Death Star droid, because the one that was on the Death Star was black, as opposed to silver, like the vintage figure in the Sandcrawler, even though it was called Death Star droid. And then the traditional Sandcrawler droid, which is also sometimes called Death Star droid in the modern line, in the silver deco, has also been released, both as the Build-A-Figure and then eventually repainted on a 50th anniversary Lucasfilm vintage card. But this one is actually closer to the toy, which apparently is an entirely different droid altogether and has his own name. So there's kind of 3 of them, silver, black, and then silver with black deco that was only as a toy, but now released here. The black one tends to be the true Death Star droid. I mean, this is the one that was on the Death Star. Calling the silver one the Death Star droid is just paying homage to the vintage line. So it was cool in Power of the Force 2 to finally get this corrected. The next one we got was also another long-needed single-card figure, which was the AT-AT driver, or as we called them in my generation, the AT-AT driver. They'll always be the AT-ATs. But I guess that would make the Chicken Walker the AT-sta. I don't know. Either way, the AT-AT, when it was released for Power of the Force 2 as the year's 2 bottom shelf sort of high-priced item, included 2 pack-in figures of the AT-AT driver and commander, i.e. General Veers, though it wasn't General Veers, or at least it wasn't called that on the box. The single-card AT-AT driver, much like the single-carded Leia, presented a figure that we already had in Power of the Force 2, but now slightly modified and available on a single card. So thanks to Rebel Scum for their great archive. I highly recommend it if you need to check out images comparing and contrasting different releases. Both Rebel Scum and Bantha Skull have great archives. Of course, the AT-AT driver, as a very prominent Imperial trooper, would get re-released several times and updated several times, probably most prominently in the Legacy collection. And since so many of us had this figure as kids, since it was released right in the sort of middle of the Empire Strikes Back launch, which kind of made it one of the, highest produced figures in the vintage line, because Empire was when you were getting the most. Well, it was great to have an update of this figure as well, and, you do need more than one of this guy, right? Because there's 2 of them driving that AT-AT, or AT-AT. So hey, there's nothing wrong with getting another one, even if he's slightly different. So now you could have the pack-in one and the single-carded one, and you cote fully equip your AT-AT. All right, last up in this wave that jumped retail was Pote, Snitkin? I don't know how to pronounce these names. Go look it up, nerds. So this guy is a character I'd never heard of until the action figure came out. But he's totally legit. I mean, he's in the movie, but it's definitely one of those blink and you miss him. So he's had some prominent magazine time, when they sort of do spotlights on Jabba's skiff guards. Since he's one of the prominent ones, he's actually the guy driving, not the main skiff, the one with Luke and Han on it, but the second skiff, the one that's just got a bunch of Jabba goons. Which is why you don't see him as much, because the prisoner skiff, which is sort of the hero skiff, tends to get more screen time. But hey, for fans wanting to complete 2 skiffs and have, a full-on battle, well, you needed somebody to drive those skiffs, and Pot Snitkin, not even going to try here. So he fit the bill. And it was kind of cool to get an alien I'd never seen before. His overcoat that went over the orange one there was a little bulky, and I couldn't even fit him in the drawers that I have. I had to actually remove the coat. And there have been some fans that have done customs doing a cloth coat to show what he could look like if he was ever updated in the vintage collection. Speaking of which, the vintage collection did eventually give us the other driver for the Hero skiff. So now we have almost all of the skiff drivers for that one, or the passengers, the crew. We're still missing one of Jabba's henchmen from the prisoner skiff, and I think two from the other one. I could be mistaken, but yeah, we still have not gotten complete skiff sets. But hey, Kenner's working on it. Hasbro's working on it. It's great to see that, even this late in the game, we're still getting important sort of skiff guards and skiff drivers. Up next was episode 1, so the breaks were going to be we'll put on Classic Trilogy, and the focus was going to be on episode 1 for about the next year. And yep, I was right there, out in force, buying them at midnight, somehow getting on the cover of Simi Valley Star when I drove down from college to buy my Star Wars figures. We'll get more into this in a video or two, but for now, the Classic Trilogy would continue.